we have the highest rate of clinical depression, clinical anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, all these things, everything you can mention, suicide, everything, higher than ever recorded, right? And it's been increasing for the last 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's funny because 50 years ago, we got the first drugs approved that were supposed to treat exactly that.
Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Bob Hariri from Piloting Health. And today I've got a special guest. All my guests are special, but this is a really special guest. Lou Reese, who has, in his career has done some amazing, courageous, and innovative things in building technology businesses. Lou, welcome aboard.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.
So Lou and his wife Mei Mei are founders and lead a remarkable company called Vaxxinity. Lou, tell us about Vaxxinity.
Yeah, so we started Vaxxinity and actually focus on active immunotherapy medicines, and that's a unique category. Basically, what we're trying to do is replace monoclonals with the antibodies that your body makes. So it's a personalized approach to medicine, and we think that your body's immune system, it makes a better mousetrap. So I think that if you unleash the power of the body's immune system, you end up with more functional antibodies that are actually recognized by the body as self-generated. So I think there's a huge number of different benefits that we've been able to demonstrate in the clinic and in preclinical work.
And how does that differ from the traditional vaccines we all kind of grew up with, and then the mRNA vaccines, which gained tremendous attention and favor during the pandemic?
So we're fully synthetic peptides. So it's not really a vaccine; it's an active immunotherapy because it's something that's triggering the generation of antibodies in your body for a specific period of time over a specific set of targets. And the idea there is that, just like a monoclonal antibody, biologics being the largest drug category in terms of spend on the planet, over $250 billion last year. Those drugs are very difficult to make and very difficult to take. And the other thing is, my Latin's not great, but I still remember mono means one. And so the problem with these is that you can only go after one target. And, anybody who's married will tell you that, you always do more than one thing wrong. And I think that means there's always more than one target. And especially as you get past non-human primates and into humans, and the more evolved these immune systems are, you know this better than anybody, it changes. And the end result is, if you look at, like we talked about years ago with myostatin and the Belgian blues and the cows, that single genetic mutation makes them have a huge amount of muscle mass and no fat. Interestingly, with humans, when you try myostatin alone, it has a very minimal effect. So you have to go after the dual track. Mm-hmm. So you got to go after at least two, maybe more targets to have that same impact in a human. So one of the benefits of our platform is that, think about being able to generate 4, 5, 6, 8 different monoclonal antibodies at a time. And the body can actually do that and is very proficient at doing that. And so that's really unlocked a whole other set of targets that are really unapproachable by the monoclonals.
It seems to me that you're actually doing something which is more consistent with natural immunologic function, rather than attempting to drive the generation of one clonal antibody line. And you're really doing and replicating what nature really intended the immune system to do.
Yeah, 1,000%. What you see, actually, it's really interesting. There's this thing called antibody maturation, right? And so the more that you're exposed to COVID, the better your antibody generation against that should be in a non-immunocompromised person, right?
Right.
And those antibodies actually change. So you get closer and closer to the right target as those antibodies continue to mature. What we see with
and it's a process of selection.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's run by the immune system, and it's actually like a series of check and balances where the immune system is seeing what works the best. Mm-hmm. What has the longest half-life, how sticky it is, what the binding affinity is to the different targets. All of those things are being pre-selected. And I'll give you an example that's absolutely fascinating. So I went to school in West Philly. If you go to a nightclub, you have a high probability of not getting into that nightclub because you're a foreign antibody. if you're generated in West Philly, you have a very high probability of getting into that nightclub. And the way that our antibodies work, that doorman is the blood-brain barrier.
Mm-hmm.
And our antibodies cross the blood-brain barrier, it seems like significantly more than monoclonal antibodies that are forced into the body. So there's something that marks it from our own immune system when we make it that lets it into the nightclub.
Gives it the ticket to admission.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
And these numbers, if they continue to hold up, some of these you're looking at like a 0.4 or 0.5% rate, and that's 4 times what it is on the average for monoclonals.
Right.
Those 300 or 400% differences could be really impactful when it comes to neurodegenerative diseases. The other thing that we see, and this goes back to making a better antibody, other thing that we see is if you look directly compared to the drugs that have been approved in Alzheimer's, the monoclonals, and you compare our antibodies are have a much, much higher binding affinity, and you have a higher penetration in the blood-brain barrier. So the answer is that combination basically means you get more in,
Right.
and they're more effective.
Right.
So that I think is what's driving a lot of our efficacy in both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, actually.
So the science sounds to be a significant advance from the conventional way we try and train the immune system clinically. And that's why I love what Vaxxinity is doing. Talk to me about where you guys believe your most lucrative targets are for the Vaxxinity business.
Alzheimer's is the number one cost to the OECD healthcare system. So being able to prevent Alzheimer's on a global basis is an incalculable benefit to humanity, both fiscally and from an alleviation of unnecessary suffering perspective. So I don't think it gets much bigger than that. Parkinson's is the fastest growing neurodegenerative disease in the world. And I think that's also, it's an incalculable market, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are markets that are measured in hundreds of billions of dollars a year or more, not mere, like, not just blockbuster. These are mega blockbusters.
Right.
So I think that's kind of the way I think about it. I tell people all the time, here's an interesting fact, right? We have the highest rate of clinical depression, clinical anxiety, GAD, all generalized anxiety disorder, all these things, everything you can mention, suicide, everything higher than ever recorded, right? What's interesting is, and it's been increasing for the last 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's funny because 50 years ago, we got the first drugs approved that were supposed to treat exactly that and a higher percentage of our population than ever is on those drugs.
Right.
And yet we have the highest percentage of the exact things that they're supposed to prevent. Interesting.
Very.
Right? So then when you dig into that and you see all these people, living their zombie lives, what I hear all the time, and this is from, people that are partners at huge law firms in New York, people that have climbed the ladder and done the thing they're supposed to do. And they looked at me, and this is not a joke. Lou, I'm so excited. 20 more years and I get to retire and then I can do what I really like. And I said, what do you really like? He goes, I want to get better at skiing. So you want to get better at skiing when you're 65 years old? What the is wrong with you? That's a crazy plan. This is not a good idea. This is a bad plan.
Timing is bad.
Yeah, the timing is bad.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what are you thinking? And the reason that he feels that way is because he hates his job. And the reason he hates his job is because he wakes up and he does what he's supposed to do. He puts on his shoes, takes his kids to school, brushes his teeth, but there's no purpose behind it, right? So I have the opposite problem. I wake up at, my number starts with a 3 or a 4, and I'm up and I'm going because I'm overwhelmed with a sense of purpose. So I have the opposite reality. And my sense of purpose is, I'm here and I've been given this tremendous opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to be able to eliminate unnecessary suffering from people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be if I'm not going to go do that, right? I mean, like, what could be more interesting to go do? And when you talk to Bear and Felix and Ryan, and people say, what do your parents do for, like, why do your parents go to work? And they say to help people. They don't say to make a buck. They don't say it's their job.
Mm-hmm.
There's none of that. They say what the intention really is.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a true privilege. So it's crushing, as sometimes, right? It's hard to be the guys lifting that stuff up.
Right.
But I can't imagine not doing it.
So I love it because the kids actually see you guys as missionaries, not mercenaries.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
Yes.
That in my mind is a fundamental way to determine whether or not you should be doing something. Right. If you take it on as a true missionary, and by the way, success is a completely separate phenomenon. Right.
Totally.
You can be highly successful either way, but you can live with yourself. And by the way, it makes it a lot easier to wake up at 3 a.m. when you're a missionary.
I completely agree. And you can, the mercenary is ultimately driven by either fear or greed.
Or a combination.
Yeah, or a combination of both
Right.
at different times.
Right.
And what I prefer to be driven by is actually is actually a certain degree of it's almost being oblivious in your pursuit, so what you're looking for doesn't matter, but the intention is to help and to alleviate and to make things better.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fun thing to do, and our kids, if you think about it, I tell all the kids all the time, it's like every interaction you have, every time, is an opportunity to really make a big difference, because you have no idea if the barista at Starbucks is having the worst day ever. You have no idea if she's going to let her worst day ever affect every other person she sees that day, or if she's going to have the best day ever, and that's going to affect the 10 people that are going to come through the line that are having the worst day ever. Right. And so those things are infinite and interconnected, and it lets you start over every time. Like every interaction is another one that you get to be doing the right thing.
That's why I love talking to you, Lou, because we go from immunology and vaccination and adaptive versus innate responses all the way to social psychology, which is exactly where it all kind of comes together. So look, here's what I think people are interested in. It's entrepreneurs, it's scientific and technology entrepreneurs like you and Mei Mei that are challenging the convention and creating new approaches that I actually believe can turn the field of what I would call adaptive immunity on its ear. Where does that take Vaxxinity in the near term and in the long term? Like, what's your pathway? You're on the pathway right now to a registerable therapeutic, right?
Well,
can you give us a sense of what you think the timelines are behind all this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that you can get a drug approved for the orphan indication with MSA.
Explain what MSA is.
MSA is multiple systems atrophy, so it's like Parkinson's, except instead of a very long progression and long timeline, it's a very, very rapid progression. So from diagnosis to death is usually within 4 to 6 years. So it's a very horrible, debilitating disease.
Yeah.
And we're running a trial at NYU right now with Dr. Horatio Kaufman that'll finish up the end of this year. In success, I anticipate that as an orphan indication is a relatively straight shot in terms of how you run that trial and what you do. I think that that's probably a 12-month trial, maybe 6 months of regulatory back and forth and other things. So maybe it's 18 months, but that's pretty fast. So that's I think the earliest shot on goal. I think with Alzheimer's and with Parkinson's both, particularly I'll focus on Alzheimer's first. The treatment trial that's fully funded, that has an interim look, and so does the prevention trial as designed. The interim look is 2 years in out of 4 or 5 years total. And there's every chance that would be sufficient based on our numbers to be able to be approvable or registerable. And then Parkinson's, we're gonna do a 1-year large scale phase 2. And after that, it's you're still going to need to do a phase 3, but you have a widely accepted functional drug in Parkinson's that's very disruptive to the industry after the phase 2.
Right. Well, listen, I'm looking forward to your continued updates on the progress. I think Vaxxinity is, like I said, is a game changer, and I'm excited to see how eventually our cell therapy world and your technology find an opportunity to work together as a therapeutic solution.
I absolutely think that's a big piece of what's missing in the space. People, like we talked about just a second ago, humans are complicated.
Right.
Our immune systems are complicated. Rebuilding and taking toxins out are different.
Mm-hmm.
And you need both a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the time. Like they're not at odds. They're very much necessary to be together. And we talked about that at this conference. Repeatedly, there were examples where look at the neurons that they're trying to grow for the L-DOPA producing neurons, right? Or DOPA producing neurons. The reality of those is that those are great, but if you still have the toxic alpha-synuclein in the brain, it's going to kill them as quick as you make them.
Right.
So what you need to do is do both. And then you could actually have a real solution. I think that's where the cell therapies come in. I think we have to think about these things first from how do we stop the damage? At least that's how I think about it. And then I think about how do you actually solve that in a holistic way so that you're fixing it also.
Yeah.
Very different things,
Agreed.
But I'm excited about that. I think I really do think that's the holy grail, is when you can actually rebuild.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
So everybody, this is again Dr. Bob Hariri from Piloting Health. I'm here with Lou Reese, the co-founder and CEO of Vaxxinity, and we've been talking about his technology from the Abundance 360 Longevity meeting in San Diego, California. And I'm looking forward to bringing Lou back on as his programs progress, as he moves towards registration, and as he revolutionizes the care of a whole range of diseases with this immunotherapy, active immunotherapy. Thanks again for joining us.